The first thing the stranger saw was the streak of red across the asphalt. Thin, broken, almost lost in the dust. At first he thought it was a trick of the sunset, that deep, rust-colored glow that bleeds across the road at the end of a long, exhausted day. But then he saw movement. Barely a shift. Barely a breath. A German shepherd, ragged, trembling, crawling, with only the strength left in a failing heart, dragged himself toward the passing headlights, as if they were the last stars left in his sky. The dog's back leg twisted unnaturally behind him, fur matted with dirt and dried blood, one ear drooping as if even it had given up the effort of holding itself upright. Cars roared past without slowing, wind slapping against his frail body. Each time he tried to lift his head, it fell heavier than before. But when the stranger pulled over, gravel crunching under his tires, the dog looked up, not with fear, not with surrender, but with a quiet, desperate plea, as if he was asking one final question. Are you the one who won't leave me here? And for a breathless moment, the world held still.
The road of no more strength. He was already dying when the stranger arrived. The heat rising off the pavement burned his side, flies swarming the wound on his leg, his heartbeat stumbling in an irregular rhythm that felt more like a countdown than life. In this chapter, we dive into the raw desperation of a dog who had been running from something unseen, whether hunger, injury, or abandonment, and whose body finally betrayed him. The world is loud with rushing cars and indifferent movement. Everything around him feels fast, while he exists in painful slow motion. The stranger approaches, torn between fear of causing harm and the panic of losing precious seconds. When he touches the dog's shoulder, the shepherd tries just once to stand, but collapses with a pained cry that stays echoing in the stranger's mind. The chapter ends with the stranger lifting the limp dog into his arms, feeling how frighteningly light he is. The race against fading light. The drive to the emergency vet becomes a battle against the clock. The stranger keeps one hand on the steering wheel, the other on the dog's chest, counting the shallow breaths that seem to skip at random. The world outside blurs into streaks of gold and shadow as the sun sinks, turning the interior of the car into a fading cocoon. At the clinic, a vet rushes out, takes one look, and shouts for a crash cart. The shepherd is whisked away before the stranger can even ask what's wrong. Through windows and half-open doors, he catches glimpses of frantic movement, oxygen mask, IV lines, compressions on the dog's tiny rib cage. The vet reappears with a grave expression and lists possibilities: internal bleeding, infection, dehydration, trauma. Every word feels heavy. The stranger's hands shake.
Between life and letting go. Against all odds, the dog survives the first hour, but the battle is not over. His blood pressure is dangerously low, his temperature unstable, and the wound on his leg is older than it first appeared. Infection has already begun to spread. The vet warns that the next few hours will determine everything. The stranger refuses to leave, sitting outside the oxygen kennel while the dog sleeps, his breaths thin and uneven. Memories surface of another dog he once lost, one he couldn't save, and the guilt coils tight in his chest. He whispers to this shepherd, promising he won't walk away again. Slowly, the dog opens one eye. Not fully, not with strength, just enough to show he hears him. It's a fragile connection, but it becomes the anchor of the chapter.
The slow climb toward tomorrow.
Morning brings a fragile miracle. The dog stabilizes just enough to begin treatment. Bandages are changed, antibiotics flow through his veins, and he accepts water from the stranger's trembling hand. The dog begins to trust, not fully, but in small flickers, like brief sparks in a dark room. When the stranger tries to leave for the first time, the dog whimpers, lifting his head in a painful attempt to follow, and the stranger realizes he cannot abandon him now. Each day brings a small triumph, standing for a second, eating a few bites, resting his head in the stranger's lap. But there are setbacks too, fever spikes, trembling fits, nights where the vet warns they might lose him before morning.
The moment a life begins again. The storm rattles the clinic windows as the stranger and staff search in panic. They eventually find the shepherd collapsed behind a supply cart. He had tried to walk on his injured leg, pushing himself farther than his recovering body could manage. The vet says quietly that the dog's will to live is stronger than his strength to do so, and that he needs someone to ground him, someone he trusts. The stranger kneels, touches the dog's muzzle, and speaks softly, a promise, a plea, a vow. The shepherd's eyes soften, and he surrenders, not to death, but to help. The chapter culminates with the shepherd standing, shakily but determined, leaning fully into the stranger's hands for the first time. Recovery becomes real, not just hopeful.